Hey guys, welcome back to the Thriving Teens podcast. I am so excited to introduce you guys to our guest today. P. Dev, do you want to just give us an intro about who you are, your mission, and what you do?
Let's go. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be on. Annie and I have been in a relationship. How long have we been in a relationship? Like 2-3 years?
Over 3 years. Yeah.
I got introduced to her. You're the youngest, most successful person I've ever met in my life. So you kind of came into our church with just this like reputation of like, this girl's a beast in the most feminine, loving way possible. But developed such a great relationship together. I'm so proud of you. I love you very much. And so honored to be on here. Let's see. So I am 32 years old. I know this is a Thriving Teens podcast, and I'm not a teen. I got a lot of gray hairs. Hopefully in editing, they blacked out everything and you don't see the grays. But I've been married to my wife of 8 years. We have 2 kids, Zion Joshua and Ezra James, a 6 and a 3-year-old. I've been a pastor in ministry for about 11 years now. I love to preach. I love to communicate. I also have a couple businesses on the side and coaching. And honestly, I was asking Annie on like some tips and tricks on like, okay, you're an excellent coach. And that's just such an example of your skill sets and gift mix. And so I'm coming to her for coaching on how to coach people. So you just did an excellent job.
Now I'm going to come for you for coaching advice because I want to do similar to the academy, which you can talk about later.
Please. I'd love to do that. So yeah, I've been in ministry for about 11 years. I'm a 3rd generation pastor. That really doesn't happen that often, unfortunately. There's longevity and really health in my family line, and we love being in ministry.
Could you tell us a little bit about the highlights of your teen years? And also what it was like to grow up as a pastor's kid, because you mentioned...
Oh, man, I'm going to open the can of worms that way. Yeah, so highlights. I mean, the biggest highlight was probably my basketball career. I thought I was going to be an NBA player, and then I realized that I was 5'8", 140 pounds, and in white, so it really didn't work out that way. Although I will say I had a game winner in high school, and it was recorded. And have I relived that memory 1,000 times over? And did I peak in high school? Yep, that's probably what happened. But I would say that was probably my best high school memory and moment. Got a lot of trauma and a lot of stuff that happened from high school, especially when it comes to girlfriends and whatnot. Maybe we can talk about dating. I don't know if we're talking about that at all, but
yes, please.
Yeah, that was a bunch that happened in my high school years. Yeah. And then you talking about PK? You want me to open that can of worms?
Yes, soon. I do want to ask, like, what did you struggle with as a teenager? So you can start talking about the low lights.
Wow. What didn't I struggle with? Is more like it. Honestly, I would say I never really had a super strong fear of man, and that's a spiritual term concept that's more like falling into peer pressure, being a people pleaser, kind of having this approval addiction. I never really had that, but I would say I certainly didn't know who I was. I wasn't super clear on my belief system. And so although my dad and mom were pastors of a local body, a growing church in my area, I didn't know any Christians. I had no other people aside from my sisters, and I'm a big brother of 3. So I have 3 younger sisters. That in and of itself, I've been working with my therapist on this, honestly, but that in and of itself, the setup of that, created this hyper independence because I was always the man in the house. My dad was always in ministry, and he was solving everybody else's problems. And then I was raised in a home of my mom and 3 sisters, so 4 women. So I was so used to being the big brother, the protector, which is a large part in how I pastor nowadays, is just protective. That produced kind of who I am and how I am. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I want to hear more about the girlfriends though.
Oh God. Yeah, so I never really struggled. I never really did drugs. Alcohol was just by peer pressure. Drank a little bit, but I never liked it. To me, that was never going to be a vice of mine. Girls definitely were. And part of that was because of how men were conditioned and raised. Another part of that is some of the heroes and mentors that I had were some of the guys on the varsity team. There was this guy that was a captain. I was a freshman. So I got on the varsity team young for basketball, but then the senior captain, and he kind of took me under his wing and then just kind of showed me his world. So, he was the man on campus. Ashland's a smaller school, but, 700-800 people. But he was known around this whole area. And then he took me under his wing and just kind of coached me on how to get girls. And I was natural with that just because I was raised amongst women, so I was so comfortable and normal with them. But when you find that you have a void and then you also have a vice. I got to find a third V in a second. I'm going to figure it out. When you have a void in your heart, but then you have a vice of these habits start to develop, and then you don't have value in yourself. I'm such a
The alliteration.
Yeah, you like that? It's a disease. I have a sickness. Then I think you look for things that you think you like, but are actually killing you. And that was women for me in high school. So to be honest, I don't really tell this story very often because sometimes I think I forget it. But there's some defense mechanisms that I think the mind puts up that you kind of suppress some of these memories. I've been going through therapy, and I feel like I'm just learning how to feel feelings again.
In my psych class, we learned about defense mechanisms.
Yeah. And one of them is, I think, memory suppression. And so opening some of the stuff up, when you sent me a couple questions, I was like, this is fresh. So yeah, there was a girlfriend I had as a sophomore, and she was a freshman, and essentially left me for the senior captain of the football team. So he was the quarterback, and devastated me, wrecked me, to the point where, I don't know. You ever been through a heartbreak before? That's a good thing. It's not the best. We can talk about all that stuff because my wife and I actually are so passionate about relationships, because I think most people, especially at your age, they ruin their relationships before they even start. And we always kind of teach this law. We call it the law of individuality. There's no such thing as a broken relationship. There's only broken people in a relationship. So people bring in their brokenness into a relationship. And what happens is they break the relationship, because you can't have a healthy person and a broken person, and it creates a healthy relationship dynamic. It creates a complicated relationship. So anyways, I know the principles will always flow out. So this girlfriend of mine essentially left me for the high school quarterback and devastated me. And, he's the senior guy. I'm this young guy, so lost kind of in the dust. And then kind of reinventing who I was, I found my identity so much in basketball. And I think a lot of young men and young women, to be honest, find their identity in what they do. And then when they don't do it as well, or they fail in a job, or they don't perform well in sports or something like that, devastates you. Because I had a pretty decent career when it comes to basketball. I had this really, in our day, we called it hot girl. I had this really hot girl on my side, girlfriend. And then both were kind of shattered. Then I was like, who am I? So that also happened again my senior year. How raw do you want me to be?
Pretty raw, yeah.
Okay, so I lost my virginity as a junior. Are you okay if I go?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how.
We want to hear it all.
Okay. So I lost my virginity as a junior. Now I'm a pastor's kid. And so it's so much more complicated when your mom and dad are like these spiritual leaders of your community. I always kind of made this inner vow that I wouldn't just go around sleeping with everybody, but I would wait for somebody that really mattered to me. And so there was this girl that really did. I liked her for a couple of years, really post my first breakup in my sophomore year. A year and a half later was the first time I kind of opened up again to be like, I'd be open enough to this. I got my emotional sobriety back to where I could start to be myself again. Because, my first girlfriend, I thought, she was my world. Young love is powerful. The first time you fall in love with somebody, you are emotionally drunk. And so I was like, I finally got sobered up like a year later when I'm talking about my emotions. And then opened up, flirted with this girl for a time. She reciprocated. I'm not trying to hype myself up, but she was a good-looking girl, pretty popular. And then ended up sleeping with her after a party. And she left to go to the defensive end of the high school team, a grade above me. And I just remember making an internal vow. This is what happened. I made an internal vow then that I would never get my heart shattered like that again, because it's been betrayed essentially 2 times. Not to mention I lost my virginity, the shame, the guilt that came with that, confessing to certain people. It became news around the school. And, I was made fun of as a pastor's kid. And so I was held to the standard of, all these things are so intertwined. So I was held to a standard of moral superiority because of my spiritual lineage, even though I didn't even know what I necessarily believed. So I was always, essentially the way I saw it is I was punished for my faith when I didn't even know what my faith was. And so I'm figuring out what I believe. Do I even believe in Jesus? Okay, I don't like church. I believe there is a God. Is he mine? I don't agree with some of these principles. So when I get ridiculed for my faith, I feel shame from sin. And then I have my heart broken on multiple occasions. Basketball's not turning out the way I thought it would because it didn't have some college job offers, or not job offers, college offers for scholarships. Because our school, we had awesome talent. We had a horrible coach. And so I just don't think I was coached right. My dad and I have gone through this before, but, my dad unintentionally chose ministry over his family because ministry is so demanding, everybody else's problems. And in the season where I needed a male voice the most, it was the senior captain of the varsity team. Did that make all sense? And then it just created this concoction of, I have no idea who I was. I'm very passionate about certain things. I kind of thought I was a little stupid, to be honest. Didn't do well in school. And so I just assumed that this is how life is. So post-high school, purposeless. This is one of the reasons I preach on purpose so much, because I remember what it was like to be emotionally broken, spiritually bankrupt, relationally deprived, everything. And I felt like life ended before it even started. And so that's kind of where I came from high school. That was my high school experience. There you go.
No, thank you for that detailed summary. I'm wondering, what do you think influenced your taste in women, and how has it evolved since your first couple relationships?
It's a good question. Well, first of all, I've tasted one woman. Her name is Natalia Santos Martins Frye. I love that woman. To be honest, this is probably a deeper answer. I would say in my youth, my appetite for the girls that I liked was so immature. And I think, honestly, culture conditions people in a certain way that you emphasize the attractiveness of their physical look. And I think that is important, don't get me wrong. But I teach, you shouldn't just be attracted to them. You should admire them. And so what I mean by that is there is of course, the physical features, the physical looks. I think people have types and preferences, and I think that's okay. But I tell people to elevate standards over preferences. So preference would be like, oh, for the ladies, they got to be tall, dark, and handsome. And meanwhile, you neglect, I'm going to look at the camera, matter of fact, you neglect some people that, to be honest, might be a little shorter than your typical preference, but they got better character, they're godly, they're healthy. Yeah, short kings, exactly. So people are like, oh, I don't want a short king. Bruh, what's wrong with you? It's because that is how culture conditions you to elevate your preferences above standards. So what are your standards? Well, I think you should have somebody that's godly. I think you should have somebody that's wise. I think you should have somebody that's healthy, both physically, emotionally, spiritually, somebody that's humble. If there's one thing I think more than anything, it's humility. Somebody that's driven, that has goals and dreams. I think a man, I know there's a lot of ladies listening on this podcast, and so shout out to the ladies. But what I do want to tell you guys is you need to prioritize a man who has a mission, because a man without a mission is dangerous. He's not healthy. He's not safe. So you should not have a mate unless you have a mission. And so really investigating their character, investigating their drive. Can they admit when they're wrong? Do they take responsibility? What is their family dynamic like? Like, I'm not saying interrogate them, but I am saying you should investigate at the same time. So there's so many things in that, but I don't even remember the question you asked me, to be honest. I sometimes go on rabbit trails.
What I take away from that is investigate before you invest.
Oh, fire. No, I'm putting that in my pocket. I'm putting that in my bag. That's good. Investigate before you invest in them.
Follow-up question to that. Under what conditions do you think it's wise for a teenager to enter a romantic relationship?
You want my honest take?
Yeah.
I don't think teenagers should date. I'm not saying they can't, but I think that shouldn't be a rule, but that should be a standard in my eyes. Because I think you don't play with people's hearts. And I think the only thing that can come from young love, to be honest, a lot of the times, is heartbreak. And this is not popular, but I think dating is for data, so you can make a wise choice and a wise decision, so that you can choose if you're going to spend the rest of your life with this person. That being said, are there exceptions? Yes, but everybody thinks they're exception. And to be honest, if your relationship is exceptional, I think their reputation matters. I think their character matters most. These things matter a ton. So I think you should use your young years to just grow. Jesus did this. This is his model he left for us. So at about 17, 18 years old, we don't hear from him for a long time. forgive me, I think he was 13 years old. He grew in wisdom, stature, favor with God, favor with man, Luke 2:52. And so the only thing we hear from Jesus' life is that he grew and that he developed, and he used all those passions, those drives, those desires to build a life, to become something and become a person of value. And that's what I want to tell you. I'm so proud of you for. You've done a phenomenal job at that. But not just building things, but becoming a great woman at the same time. You're brilliant, super smart, incredibly relationally and emotionally intelligent. I love your humility. I'm so proud of you. I love being your pastor. I'm actually so sad you're going to be leaving soon.
I'm so sad.
Quite literally, I'm so sad about it. But I think you have used these years well. I also think particularly, this is a good one. This is really important. I think particularly in your youth, in your thriving teens years, in order to thrive, you do have to learn how to manage emotions. You have to manage your internal world. And if there's one thing I did not do well, it was that. And I think one of the things that, to be honest, the church has done a really poor job at is when it comes to some of the sexual urges and things like that. That's not because you're a bad person. God made you that way. And so God is the inventor of sex, sexuality, these kind of things. And what I think you guys need to hear is you need to learn how to manage those emotions, not suppress those emotions. So learning self-control young, so that when you are at a adequate age or a maturity, it's really not age, it's maturity. When you're at an adequate maturity, then you can express yourself in my biblical worldview to the context of marriage. And I know that not everybody necessarily agrees with that, and that's okay. But I would say, wisdom would say that you need to learn how to manage emotions, manage those urges, and use your youth to do that in a way where you can thrive later. Because a mood and an emotion, you can do something that you had an emotion with and for, and it can make you do something in 30 minutes that could cost you 30 years. And I know a lot of people in my high school, I was almost one of them. By the grace of God, this was not me. I had 2 pregnancy scares when I was in high school. My life would be way different if I had a kid when I was 16, 17 years old. And there's no shame or no judgment to anybody that has that. But I am saying we should use these as lessons to be able to manage emotions, because a mood can create an action, and an action can change, and what happens in 15, 20 minutes can affect your next 20 years. So I think that's really important for the youth. I know there's a lot in there. I don't know.
No, it's good. I feel like these topics are always in teens' minds, but no one's really speaking to them. So I think you can speak unfiltered. From like a more broad perspective, what's your definition of a thriving teen?
Yeah, so honestly, this is my whole, I'd say, personal philosophy. This results in my business, but then also my ministry life. So a thriving teen is somebody that has their life in order. So I just taught recently on the power of being an example. I called it Leaders of the New School. And essentially, a leader of the new school, a newer generation, is an example to people. If people didn't hear what comes out of your lips, but they only looked at your life, what would they find out? And so ordering your life, I think, is the most important part in this season of your life. But I would do it categorically. So I have 5. We call this the life pie in my kind of sphere. Is first and foremost spiritually. I think spiritually is not the only important part of life, but I think it is the most important part of life. And I think if there's something that you get good at and strong in young, it would be your theology, your understanding of your faith. I would make sure you're strong in your faith before you start to study other people's faith. And so I would say spiritually first and foremost, not the only important thing, but the most important thing. It affects your ethics, your decision making, your internal beliefs, your identity, all that. I always say never, the only one that can define me is the one who designed me. So that's your spirituality. So your spiritual life, then your emotional health. Scripture says, guard your heart above all else. It is the wellspring of life. So literally above all else, guard your heart. And I think a lot of you guys, I'm going to just say it because I've been pastoring for a long time now. A lot of you guys give your heart away to people that you should not trust it with. And so manage those emotions well. Guard your heart. You shouldn't give it to everybody. So your emotional life, I think processing pain and things like this. And I think it's foolish for people to think that just because you guys are young, you don't have some significant pain. I know a lot of people that are a result of, blended families, divorced homes, adultery, even just they've been through their own personal traumas and stuff like that. Those affect you. And, I shared the story. My son, he had these goggles on. He was at the swimming pool. Did you ever hear the story? Yeah, the blue goggles. Yeah, he turns to mom because he has these goggles on, and he's like, "Everything is blue, mommy." And my mom or my wife goes to Ezra. He goes, "Well, Ezzy, it's because you have your goggles on." So he takes his goggles off. He goes, "Oh, it's not blue anymore." And that's because the lens we have on our life oftentimes is we see through the lens of pain as opposed to purpose. And so I think your emotional well-being matters so much, way more than you can possibly fathom. And so I think it's so important to be emotionally healthy. So spiritually, emotionally, physically, most people don't take care of their health. And I think it's actually a good stewardship of self to take care of your health. I don't think that's selfish. I think it's good stewardship. That being said, it can go selfish and it can be vain. But I take care of me so I can take care of you. So for me, I need to be in this for the long haul, and people need me healthy and strong, both physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. I think there are people for your improvement and for your assignment. Improvement and for your enjoyment. And so I want to enjoy life. I want to do it with people I love. I want to go on vacations with certain people. And that's something, honestly, if I can just say it out loud, that's something I've challenged Annie in a lot is you are so driven and I am so inspired by your drive. But one of the conversations we've had for the last 2 years has been relationally, is engaging with people. And you're so mature beyond your age, but that's been an area that we've talked through of just you trust me, you don't want to have a deficit in the relational area. And to be honest, I've done the very same thing the last probably 5-6 years and I've been talking with my wife about this, I don't want to be somebody that has built a great thing and you have nobody to share it with or nobody to celebrate with. I don't want that for my life. So relationally. And then lastly would be professionally. And I think your professional life matters tremendously. I think wealth is a weapon. I think it's very important to have assets and resources. Don't get me wrong. But I think your professional life is, you are designed to contribute to society. And so long answer to essentially say, that's what a thriving teen looks like to me, is when your life is ordered and you're thriving spiritually, emotionally, physically, relationally, and professionally.
Yeah, that's so good. If you were to have a conversation with your 14-year-old self, what framework would you give them to live like a thriving teen?
So I have a coaching framework, and I love using this. I do this subliminally to a lot of people that don't even know I'm using a framework. I'm assuming that's kind of how you do it too. So I call this the GOOD model, GOOD. And I wish somebody just sat me down this simple, but they just ask, okay, what are your goals? G. What are your options with that? This is when I spend the most time on what are the obstacles that are in the way. That's a lot of pastoring right there, just in that question. And then, okay, what are the decisions? Essentially, what are the actions that you do? So goals, options, obstacles, and then decisions. Do you want me to go through it?
Yeah, and I also want you to expand on maybe high income skills you would invest in learning in, habits on the daily, what type of relationships you would put in your life, and also how to test the fruit of friends. Because I think a lot of teens struggle with falling in the wrong friend group or picking the wrong person to date and valuing charisma over character.
You're listening. You had a girl. I love it. That was a reference to my most recent sermon, so it's good. Help me remember the fruit thing. I want to come back to that. But you asked a few questions in there. High value skills. You asked a few different questions. Which one do you want me to tell?
So first, high income skills.
To be honest, I think the one thing that can change everything is communication. I feel like now I am finally learning how to maximize that skill set. And I think communication is a meta skill. So it's a skill that gives birth to other things. And so if you have the ability to communicate in a way that people understand and they can grasp it, how you say it, the delivery in which you say it in, the phraseology you use to the action steps. I have frameworks that I use for a ton of my sermons, but then also if I'm digital, or if I'm online, I'll use different frameworks there because a different audience and a different platform requires a different method. And so I think communication, number one, would be first and foremost, is if you get better with words, everything gets better, period, point blank. I'd say that. I'd also say this sounds crazy, but if you know how to really listen well, I really do think that this is a massive high-value skill. Because when I hear people tell me problems, I am always asking, what is behind what they're saying? Because typically they don't reveal the first thing. And if you can get good at hearing patterns in people, and not even just one person, but multiple people over time, you'll eventually see that there is a common theme in a heart cry of a human. And so if you can actively listen, all of a sudden you see the problem. And now all you have to do is create a solution for that problem. And I think that actually can become where businesses come into play. So if you can see a common pattern of problems people have and you provide a solution to that, all of a sudden you have all these opportunities. So to me right now, I'm in a season where I feel like I have been doing this for so long and leading for so long and communicating for so long. I'm like, I want to start this. I'm doing this event. I want to start this business. I want to preach in this place. I also want to be in the marketplace. So my team right now, my staff, my assistant, they have to tell me like, slow down, relax. We're going to do a few things at a time. But I feel like I've become this serial entrepreneur where I'm like, I want to be in everything all at once, all the time. It's been a blast. So fun. So I think active listening is a massive one. I also just think leadership. If you can lead people, not just manage them, although I do think that's a part, but if you can inspire people to action, there will be no place in your life or any business where you cannot thrive. So to me, it's if you can lead yourself well, you can lead others well. And I'm fully convinced, and I say this with humility, not arrogance. I am fully convinced I can go into a completely different space that I have never had any training for. I could learn the product, I can learn the system, but because I have the meta skill of leadership, I can go into any environment and I believe I could thrive. No question about it. To be honest, a lot of people that come to me are people that are in the marketplace world, and they don't just ask me about spiritual stuff. They ask me a lot about leadership stuff. Because I think if you can lead in a volunteer organization where you don't pay people, you don't give them a salary, you give them significance. And if you can use that as vision casting, which I think is another one, but it's really related to leadership. If you can lead yourself and lead people and you can communicate, I think the world opens up to you. And I think those are massive value-adding skills that have value proposition where you can actually advocate for yourself in any environment and you can get way more income. But I think more than income in my eyes, you get more influence and impact, and then income follows both of those things.
Yeah, that's so good. Could you name some practical, specific resources you've used to develop those skills?
Particular like you're talking about books?
Communication, leadership, books, maybe coaching that you've invested in, or just practical habits for the daily?
All the above. So I have this simple framework, content, community, coaching. So I think if you want to thrive, those are my three things I would say and recommend for anybody. So when somebody comes up to me and they say, I want to grow, or I want to get better, or I want to fix this problem, my mind always goes to, okay, what content do they need? So I'll point you to a couple resources depending on what it is. And so the content I use is, we have this framework called Core 4. So spiritual depth, personal growth, relational health, leadership strength. And so when I look at somebody, I typically go through those 4 quadrants, the Core 4. So that's the content. Community is, do they have relationships? Do they have like-minded relationships? Are there people in their life that they can kind of rub shoulders with? And are they around an environment of just lions? Like, are you hungry? So who you surround yourself with, Proverbs says, walk with the wise, become wise, a companion of fools suffers harm. And so if you walk with wise people, you'll become wise, and wisdom has blessings attached to it. But a companion of fools suffers harm. So you don't even have to be a fool. If you're around fools, you'll be around foolish things, and destruction comes. And then I'd say coaching. So to me, that has been the thing that has leveled up everything, is I've had people in my life who are just a lot farther ahead than I am, but I am very specific and strategic on who I want to invest in me. And so I want people that are, they're theologians and they're just like spiritual surgeons. Like, I've just fallen in love with theology. I wish I understood the value of that when I was younger, particularly at like a thriving teenage, 16 to 21 years old. I wish I fell in love with the word then. But then also I want a strong marriage. So my wife and I actually got a professional, and we did that when we were younger, and that has set us up for success. At the time of this recording, we're doing this event this upcoming weekend, and we're like 4 days away from it, and it's already completely maxed out, and we're calling it Relationships Uncensored. And it's basically, we're just talking about anything and everything about relationships that typically the church doesn't talk about. I think that is what we do, is provide content for people, community, and coaching.
Yeah, that's so good. Next part of my question originally was about what healthy and holy habits you'd implement. And even just practical tips on time management with the busy school schedule. It's like, if you're to study your word, do you do that before school, after school? When would you fit that in?
So good. Well, first of all, I don't think you guys need to hear me. I think you just need to listen to Annie because she's the best when it comes to time management, and when it comes to just healthy habits. But I like that you said, because I do think it's both and. It's healthy and holy habits. So what are some holy habits? One, I would say Sabbath, rest. So Sabbath in Scripture is a reference to not producing. It means to essentially don't work. And so what I think Sabbath does is Sabbath rests the mind, the body, and the spirit. So you take a day of not producing, and everybody producing is different because all of our work is a little bit different. Back in the day, it used to be laborious work with your hands. But to be honest, in the day and age we live in, is with your mind. So your mind, you need to rest. And here's what I think happens when you do not produce. You dedicate time away from work. You dedicate time towards God. And what happens is you rest the body, you rest the mind, you rest the soul. I use this acronym REST. So you relax, you examine, you surrender. That's time with the Lord. And then what was T? And then it's time for play. And so that is kind of a framework for, that's what you should be doing on a Sabbath day, is I am relaxing. So literally like, I don't know, sleep in a little bit later. I might take a nap during the day. I might just get some sunlight, get my feet on the ground in the grass. I examine, so I'm examining my motives, my life, my calendar. I surrender. I take time with the Lord. So extended times of prayer, study. Mondays are my Sabbath. So every single Monday, without a doubt, I don't work. Now, there are times where I violated that. And to be honest, I feel very convicted about it often. But then also time for play and time with my family. So I play basketball Monday nights. So that's just, to me, that's not actually physical rest, but it is very much rest for my soul. Is I need a competitive outlet. I'm a very aggressive personality, so I need an outlet where I can be very competitive.
Can we play one-on-one?
You want to play one-on-one?
Yeah, I used to play club basketball.
In basketball?
Yeah.
You play?
Yeah.
For real? You pretty good? Yeah, so, that's what Sabbath is essentially. So I'd put in that practice of the Sabbath, meaning you rest. And here's what I think is really important. So this is a challenge for you too, is when you Sabbath, you rest the mind. And what I think happens is I got introduced to this term called creative abundance, where essentially you never know when God will give you an idea. But I noticed that really after I rest and I spend time with Him and I spend time away from doing things, I get my best ideas, I get fresh, I have longevity with it. And so what I do with the creative abundance a lot of times determines if I have financial abundance. And so I get my best ideas. I get reminders that, I need to make sure I do this, I implement this. And to be honest, I'm in a season where I have the most responsibility I've ever had, but I feel more ahead than I've ever been. And that's a good feeling. And I want to remain that way. I don't believe in, just exhausting yourself until you're, totally tapped out and you have adrenal failure and you're in the hospital. I'm not saying that. That's not going to be my portion of my life. So that's one holy habit. I need to think study, solitude.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Like a common objection that sometimes I get from other students, it's like, if I take one rest day, won't I have to study more or work more on the other days? For you, do you still feel well-balanced when you take one day off?
Very much so. Great question. I think that is, so when it comes to Sabbath, I know, I don't know, and I have a faith-based worldview, a biblical worldview. So what I think happens is when you rest, what you are saying is, I am no longer on the throne of my life. I am allowing the Lord to be there. And for those that wrestle with the faith, this is a good concept, generally speaking. I would highlight that I believe that if I allow God to come into my life, I allow Him to be a part of my schedule, my time, He can do more in 6 days than I can do in 7 days. That's what I firmly believe. And not to mention, I think there's practical solutions to, you're just more rested, you're sharper. So to me, the metaphor is if you have an axe and you're trying to hit down a tree, a lot of people would say, just get after it. But the reality is you just got to sharpen the axe. And what could take, multiple hours could take a few minutes if the axe is just sharp. And what I think rest does is it makes you sharp. And so that's why I would say the Sabbath is so important, is it makes you sharper.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now you can continue talking about the other habits here.
So Sabbath, I think solitude, just time away. I typically have a healthy mix of vitamins and a couple items like that. I take my son to school, but before I go to school, I always study and I read for about 30 to 45 minutes right now. To be honest, I wish it was a little longer, but it doesn't always happen that way. But my daily disciplines are what I would live and die by. So if I don't get to read in the morning, my day feels off and I feel like it's just totally wrong. I always try and get some sunlight, especially in the summer seasons here in Mass. It's a lot easier, but winter season is a little bit tougher. So I have this scripted morning routine that I do and abide by every day. That's been a game changer for me. And John Maxwell says success doesn't happen in a day, it happens in the daily. So for me, it's the daily disciplines that produce incredible results. So I'd say those are some good holy habits that I have in place. And then there's healthy habits of just like exercise. I believe that my life should not just be endured, but enjoyed. I want to enjoy life. So when we do our calendar planning meeting, me and my assistant, we have an A-team meeting every week, which we'll call it. And then we put the major priorities in first. So I've clearly identified my values. We call it F5. So it's my faith, family, fitness, my future. So that's just kind of projects and things that I'm working on for the future, because I want to design it. I don't want to just be by default and hope it works out. And then also fun, and in that is like some friendships and stuff. So those 5 things go on my calendar first. I'm sure you've talked about this countless times on priority management. So my time with the Lord goes on my calendar first. My date night with my wife, also individual time with both of my sons, family times we have, vacations we plan in family, and then fitness. I want to make sure that first of all I'm doing the right necessary things. And then future, there's a ton of things in there, but some of that is my, my coaching business, my social media, to mentorship, and then fun is I'm always putting like fun stuff on the calendar. And I think honestly I think this is important. I think the reason most teens or youth are scared to grow up or even post-college is because they see adults that don't really live lives that they enjoy. And I saw that. And to me, I'm like, that's why post-high school, when everything was kind of crumbling for me, I was like, I feel devastated because I thought this was the best life it's going to get. But the older people, the people that I see, especially back in the day, I was like, they look like they're all serious and they have all this responsibility. It doesn't look like they enjoy their life. And I just refuse to live that way. So fun is a part of my life where we just got back from Arizona. My wife and I, we love to just do adventurous things all the time. We have a blast with stuff like that. So we just started fishing. My wife and I are doing tennis right now. I had a fishing trip with my son the other day. That was just like, it was the best dad moment I ever had. It was awesome. So we do a lot of fun stuff all the time. So that's what I'd say is calendar management, exercise and health, nutrition, but then also your holy habits.
That's so good. Last part of my really lengthy question was, how do you test the fruit of either a friend or a potential romantic partner?
Yeah.
Specifically like teenagers, considering we're still developing. So how do you spot like not just potential, because I know patterns are important, but potential in friends at least,
Yeah, so Matthew 7, Jesus talks about don't give to dogs what is unholy and don't cast your pearls to swine. So he highlights dogs and pigs. And really what he says is don't give what is valuable to you to people that won't value you, is really a translation of that. And what comes from that is he also talks about in that same chapter is you shall know a tree by its fruit. And so you have to do fruit assessment. What is fruit? Social proof. It is evidence of what they have going on in their life. So what would fruit be? Fruit would be like decisions, reputation, interactions you have on a regular basis. And what I teach people is you shouldn't just manage relationships emotionally, but intelligently as well. I'm not saying throw out your emotions. I think that God made us emotional. It's good. But you should manage your relationships intentionally as well as emotionally. And so paying attention to fruit, are they a liar? There's a difference between people that make mistakes and people that are toxic. And there are both. Proverbs talks about wise, foolish, and evil people. And so identifying the people that, like, do they lie or do they withhold truth, which I think is a sign of deception, is also a form of lying. You got to pay attention to those kind of character traits. Because to be honest, I think there needs to be grace for people, but there also is something as abusive grace as well. Do you know what I'm talking about? So like allowing people to just run over you, that is not biblical. Contrary to, some of you guys might have heard turn the other cheek. And that does not speak to being used and abused. That is speaking to don't retaliate. Revenge is not your responsibility, it's the Lord's. So I think it's so important to do fruit assessment. And to be honest, I just studied this recently. This is from a book. If you guys want a book or resource, it's called When to Walk Away by Gary Thomas, How to Find Freedom from Toxic People. Read it? Fantastic book. I wish I read it before. But he talks about there's 41 times in the Gospels where Jesus walked away from people that were abusive, that were trying to harm him, trying to kill him. And he is an example to us of walking away from people that, to be honest, are just harmful. So we have to be discerning of, is this person for me or are they against me? Because to be honest, I don't think they're really neutral relationships. I think there are some people that take you away from your purpose. I think there are people that thrust you towards your purpose. And I think a thriving teen is somebody that is way more intelligent and strategically manages their relational life young. They don't just follow their heart, because to be honest, our heart is deceitfully wicked a lot of times. We don't know what we want a lot of times. And if I followed all of my passions that I had internally, my life would be a lot different.
When you and your wife Nat were initially dating, in what ways did she bring you closer to your purpose?
Such a great question. And I think that is the question that people should be asking of romantic relationships. So there's this concept that I've been teaching for years called soulmate. And although you don't find that exact term in scripture, the concept is absolutely there. So in Genesis, I think it's 2, God created Eve for Adam, and she was a suitable helpmate for him. And so soulmate, by definition, or at least our working definition, has been somebody that is healthy for your soul and necessary for your assignment. So I had to ask in my younger years, because I had vision for my future, I knew what I wanted to do. I'm doing what I saw I was going to do years ago. And I think it's so important to have vision for your life. So I went to Natalia when we started kind of feeling each other out, liking each other, flirting a little bit. And I basically told her, hey, if we're going to move forward, to be honest, I don't see many guys doing this nowadays. I got to be totally honest with you.
Guys, listen up.
Serious. If we're going to move forward, then I'm not asking you to be a pastor's wife. You need to be a pastor yourself. And I know exactly what I'm doing. And so what I did in that moment, I didn't realize how profound it would be. But I was prioritizing my calling over my preference over this girl. But I said, I am obsessed with what God is going to do with my life. And if you don't see that you can come into alignment with that, then God bless you. You're an incredible woman, but you're not for me. So I challenged her, and she said, like, her immediate response was like, a big gulp. But she was challenged. And the reason I am what I am today is by the grace of God, but also by the response of my wife. Is she makes me 10 times better. Scripture talks about 1 could put 1,000 to flight, 2 could put 10,000 to flight. And so me and her together are soulmates, because not only is she healthy for me, she makes me better. She challenges me. She corrects me. She encourages me and supports me. She's strong when I'm weak. I'm strong when she's weak. We're we're also best friends. So like we developed a great friendship together in our younger years, and we honestly were best friends before we were ever dating. And that's how we started our relationship. So she was healthy for me, but she was also necessary for my assignment. I knew my assignment. And so what I was trying to discern is Natalia at the time, is she somebody that can make me better than me? Can she bring out the best version of me? Do I see myself? And I ask this question all the time to people that are dating. Okay, well, do you see him as the father of your children? And I've had people respond back, absolutely not. I'm like, then why are you wasting your time and his time? Cut it off. I am some people's greatest cheerleaders when it comes to their relationships, but I'm also the grim reaper at the same time. I will cut off a relationship fast. Like, oh, somebody, I'm not going to mention who it was. It's this girl behind the camera. But she was coming into our church at the time, and I was preaching on being unequally yoked, which is not just sharing the same faith, but if you share the same values. Because there are some people that might have the same faith, but it doesn't mean they share the same values. And just because they're a Christian doesn't mean they're good for you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, totally.
Is it possible for them to be of a different faith and share the same values?
I think Is it possible? For sure. Is it helpful? Is it wise? I wouldn't say so. Particularly because how are you going to raise children together? Is you should be in alignment. And that's what I would suggest for anybody that has a romantic relationship that you're trying to pursue. If you're trying to find a soulmate, healthy for the soul, necessary for my assignment, what is your assignment? Are you taking care of the soul? Are they able to take care of your soul? But if you don't have value alignment on, okay, how are we going to discipline our children? How are we going to manage our money? Are we doing separate accounts? Or are we doing a joint account? What about travel? What about how are we going to manage our in-laws? What do you believe about divorce? Where are you at on the political scale? Are you left or are you right? You have all these things. Marriage by itself, having kids by itself is hard enough on its own. If you don't have agreement and alignment on values, I don't know how people last, to be honest. Nat and I, we fight, but we have total alignment on the major areas. We have differences on some areas, but not on the major ones.
Question selfishly for myself, but I also think it's going to help a lot of other people. What's your framework for dating in college? If you even think that's a good idea.
No, I think most people find significant others in college. Well, first, so when you ask a question like that, I want to know what's behind the question first and foremost. I also would always go to not what is the question, but why are they asking it and what is the motive behind it. So I think when people ask questions like that, and I get those questions constantly, it is, okay, what's driving it? Are you scared? Are you fearful? Why? What is motivating that? What event took place that has given you that filter of why you're fearful going into college for some of those things?
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if this...
What is the question? What is behind the question?
Yeah, I think for me, like I obviously want to find my future spouse. And one of my friends, she recently got married. And she just told me, she was like, I'm really grateful I found my spouse while I was in college because, like she said, before you're 25, your personality is still really moldable. So she was like, we were able to be more compatible with each other, experience so many of our early adulthood experiences together while they were in college. So I'm not trying to have a very fixed mindset. I need to find my future spouse in college, but it's just something I would prefer.
Definitely. And I think having preferences is okay. I went to college. I dated a girl in college that it was my first Christian relationship I ever had. So my assumption was, oh my God, this is going to end in, marriage. And Christians can just dive into things so fast, to be honest. It was my worst relationship I ever had. Like, it was way more worldly and it was way worse than the relationships I had in high school with people that didn't share my faith. So I would say because I put so much investment into it, I thought, wow, I just wasted 2-3 years of my life investing in this relationship dynamic, and it was my least favorite one. And as a result of that, I was like, I don't even know if I believe in this anymore. Like, I don't know if I want to be in a monogamous relationship long term. I don't know if I want to even be married necessarily. Like, there was literally seasons of that because all my romantic relationships had ended in some significant pain. Because of that, that's why I got so passionate about, like, okay, maybe I'm just seeing some things wrong. Maybe I'm fearful. But I did have that thought of going into college. I had all these experiences. We shared a ton of history together. We have inside jokes. We went on events together. We were in different states and countries even together. We went on a mission trip together. And I was like, all that is just gone. How am I ever going to find somebody that shares the same core memories as me? And so I did have a fixed mindset because I was like, I got to start all over now. And what I realized is those weren't wasted seasons. As long as a season is never wasted, as long as there are lessons learned from it. So then I got lessons learned from it, which were, I now know what I'm not looking for as opposed to what I am looking for. So I think the clearer you can get on what you want and aligning that with, is this helpful? Is this healthy? I think that is going to be super helpful for you. In if you don't know what you want, you won't know when you get it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What were some of the things that you defined that you didn't want after that relationship?
I couldn't do drama. I couldn't do the argumentative. My relationship was exhausting with her. I professionally now, one thing I say about my wife all the time that I absolutely adore about Natalia is I deal with people's drama every single day. From counseling to coaching to my phone is a problem center. I will go and wake up in the morning. I'll try and clear as many text messages out, emails out as possible. End of the day, 55, 60 text messages, a few different Voxer, which walkie-talkie app kind of thing. And it's constant. And the last thing I would want is to go home and there's more drama and more problems because my wife is that way. My wife is not that way. She's so low maintenance, and I'm so grateful for that. So she's not argumentative, but she is strong at the same time. So I wanted somebody that also could challenge me as opposed to exhaust me. So those two were huge lessons at the same time. But then I also wanted somebody I could have fun with, do life with. I don't want to just be, my job is like spiritual and serious all the time. I don't want to be around somebody that's just spiritual and serious constantly. I want somebody that's goofy, that's fun. We can have a blast together, adventure together. So Nat and I sometimes we'll be with our kids. Our kid's in the backseat, Zion's 6, as he's 3. And a song comes on and we'll just blast it. We're just going crazy in the car. Like, I love that.
Does Nat also use alliteration?
No, she doesn't.
Thank God.
She does not have the same issue.
Because 2 of you would be insane.
No, Nat's not that way. She's like, Def, you gotta chill with it.
If you guys had a daughter, what would you teach her about godly femininity?
Oh, God have mercy. What a question. Well, first,
with a daughter,
my mom says this all the time. She goes, "You need a daughter. It would soften you up so much." And I'm like, I know. I don't. Maybe that's why God didn't give me one. I don't know if I could handle it. What would I teach her about godly femininity? That's a fire question. Well, I'd say, I don't know. I don't even know yet. I do feel like I have so many. I'll qualify it. I do have so many women that look to me as their pastor, and I always balance it with a healthy relationship with Natalia. Like, I always want to make sure it's appropriate. But when it comes to women, what I'll tell them is we do not suppress women in leadership in our church. And so what I want to teach a lot of people, being a mother is great, but there's more to being a woman than being a mother. I think there's more than just motherhood. I think that is the greatest calling. I think it's the hardest job on the planet. Don't get me wrong. But what I've taught and trained and had tough conversations with my wife on has been, you have gifts and call of God that's on the inside of you that I think needs to be developed and harnessed, because I think she is a speaker. We just had a conversation yesterday on, I want to train her to be a preacher more. And so over the next 3-4 years, like, she's going to develop a significant voice. I want to see her release a book herself. There's loads of things in there. So I would teach women that you're not just made just for motherhood. I also think we need women who are strong when it comes to leadership and kind of a business acumen. I think because we live in a male, I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to a woman. You could ask anybody on my staff. I am an advocate for women in leadership, big time. And so what I tell them is, we have a abundance of male dominant leadership in both the marketplace and ministry. But I think what we need is females to enter those spaces, because they bring in a strength and a sensitivity that a lot of men don't have. And so I think having a balance of both men and women in leadership and the combo of both of those create healthy organizations. My dad says it like this about the church. He says we have fatherless homes, but we have motherless churches. And I think the significant issue in culture is that we have fatherless homes. And so kids are not getting the identity from their parents or from their father particularly, or security that a father provides. But when it comes to the church, or when it comes to religious spaces, we have motherless churches because typically it's male dominant. And what I think happens so much is you have these religious, legalistic, performance-oriented cultures that I think that added to the strength and the sensitivity of a woman create a healthy dynamic and a healthy culture. So I teach a couple of things like that. I wish women were a lot stronger with men, to be honest. Not in an argumentative way. I will double down on that. Not to be argumentative or arrogant, because I do think, if I'm allowed to be honest, I think the culture is producing these hyper independent, I'm gonna just say it, feminazis that are exhausting, and no man is gonna want to be with somebody like that. But there is a difference between somebody that is strong as a woman as opposed to being arrogant as a woman. So my wife, when she corrected me, there was one time I was essentially complaining about a circumstance in a season that I was in when it comes to my professional life. And instead of her comforting me, she corrected me. And she goes, how long are you going to sit in this? Because that is not the man that I know. And do I think some people have wronged you? Sure. But you're not a victim. And when she challenged me like that, I was like, that's my wife. Like, it actually was inspiring as opposed to, and she didn't offend me. She like inspired me. And I was like, that's it. I need somebody that when I'm down, she's up. And that she's somebody that can go through hardships. I can go through hardships with. That was a clear distinction of this woman's going to be my wife one day. And I quite literally, like, that was the moment for me. I was like, it wasn't a high. It wasn't like a super positive experience. It was, I had a negative one. She challenged me and I'm like, I want to do life with this girl for the rest of my life.
Do you subscribe to the ideology that there are low value men / women and high value men / women?
No. No, not at all. Because I think the reason a man is a low value man in a person's perspective is because nobody has affirmed, believed, challenged in them. So even labeling them as that, I think is foolishness. I also think, and I'm a leader, I'm also a pastor. So I think leadership is to be trained, but I think the spiritual leadership side of it is, leadership is for information, pastoral leadership is for formation. And so to be honest, I think the quote unquote low value men are people that have never had a leader that challenged them or loved them really well. So to me, it's always a leadership issue. And I think it showcases the problems in our culture today, because if you are labeling somebody as a low value man, to be totally honest with you, I think that is a low value woman practice. I'm not saying you are a low value woman, but if you're going to label somebody who you should believe in, even if you keep a distance.
I'm laughing because I always joke with my brother and I call him low value man.
It's absolutely toxic and terrible. But I would say I want to be known for believing in people. I want to be known for being guilty of grace. I would never label somebody like that, because to be honest, those kind of labels, they stick with people. And we all have our experiences with that. I remember statements people said to me years ago that still register in my head. I did a spoken word this one time called Word War 3. And it's all about the language and the words that people use. Let me see if I can remember a piece of it. It was one angry and evil lie that was planted in my mind. And since I was 6 years old, I still wrestle with it, thinking that they might be right. Something about, I'll remember some of the stuff, but essentially there was a line somebody planted in my mind that I remember as a 6-year-old kid that created my identity later. And I just think it's very dangerous to throw out labels like that. And I think it's actually, to be honest, pretty toxic.
How soon in the relationship, let's say you're just seeing each other, you happen to find that your girlfriend, boyfriend, should you have this conversation about how you want to raise your kids and stuff? Just asking for a friend, you know?
Yeah, it's just for a friend here. You're still single, right?
Yeah.
For the record. Annie Long, listen, if you want her hand in marriage, if you want to go after her heart, don't you dare cut it. You're not cutting this. Don't edit this. You have to come to me, her pastor. And let me just say, all business inquiries, all relationship inquiries can come to me. And the answer is absolutely no. Do not go after this girl. She is too awesome. You're not going after her. That being said, I just need to make sure that plug was in there. What was your question?
Like, at what stage in the dating relationship do you have those conversations about how you want to raise your kids?
So I said this before. Dating is for data. You are collecting information about a person to make a wise decision. So because dating is for data, a good date is not that, oh, we had a good time, although I think that matters. A good date is I got good information. And so if you are going on dates with people or dating somebody, you should get to know who they are in two different areas, seasons and settings. So a season would be like a time frame, winter season. And in winter season, you see them in different settings. So you have, Thanksgiving just ended. You're going to the Christmas season. That season typically is the season where people feel the most family pain and trauma because they're around their family a lot. And so what do they look like when they're in family dynamics? I'd also say looking at them in settings is, okay, how do they handle a tough conversation? How do they treat their mom behind the scenes? How do they treat her in front of them? What are their sibling dynamics like? Is there sibling rivalry? Is there honor and love? Does this person have a strong identity and secure identity in who they are? What do they believe about fate? Loads of different things like that. Like, I think that is what a date is for, is collecting information about that, because you want to get to know their beliefs, not just their body. And that's why I would always come back to is, this is why I think God's ways are not just right, they're best. And so most people get to know their body physically when they don't know their beliefs emotionally or internally. And that's where I think we come into problems, because it's like, okay, we had a good time because we were physical, but then they're like, well, I actually cannot stand this person, but she's hot or he's hot, but I actually cannot stand them, but we just have a good time together. To me, I'm like, you ain't helping anybody here. And what comes with that is nothing but baggage.
When do you ask someone to be your boyfriend or girlfriend? What type of data do you need to know before then?
I'd say there's 4 stages. And I have all these lists, so everybody makes fun of me for my lists. So I think there's like the kicking it stage. Like, that's where you kind of feel each other. You guys are.
Can you do that with multiple people at the same time?
That's a great question. That is
ask for a friend.
That is all these seem very for everybody else, not. I think that's nuanced. So I'd say person by person, and I think it's customized case by case. So there is a difference between somebody being a pursuer to find a significant other and a creeper at the same time. So a pursuer and a creeper are different. I think women should position themselves to be found. I also think, to be honest, I believe in the traditional, a man should be a pursuer primarily. But I think people are terrified of rejection, so there's so much in that. That being said, can you pursue multiple people? Yeah. I think there needs to be a removal of the stigma that you can't. But I also think there's a difference between somebody that is trying to identify with wisdom, is this person for me? And then also there is an identifier of this person is completely desperate and just needs to be validated and get attention. So that's why I say it's kind of customized. Like, can you go on multiple dates at the same time? I don't think that looks great, but I think if you're honest and open, and to be honest, I think so many people are not honest nowadays. I would say to people, like, I want to take you out to coffee. I think we should de-escalate how important a coffee date is, which, by the way, absolutely none when you go to college. You shut that down for a couple years, all right? We need to make sure.
My Calendly calls are like called coffee date or coffee chat.
Really?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Just making friends.
I don't know if I'm ready for you. I don't know if wow. I'm getting emotional. No, okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready for you to start dating like that.
It's networking.
Yeah, I'd say it is case by case. I think you gotta be careful because reputation does matter. I would be open and honest. I wouldn't necessarily say, hey, I'm dating multiple women, because I think you're gonna get shut down immediately. Or I'm going on dates with several guys. I think that is a little awkward. But I would say, I'd like to see if there is friendship, a dynamic here. And if not, that's okay. I wish you the best. But I think people need to learn how to have some honest dialogue like that. Like, that's part of just being a mature person. So I think you have the kicking it stage. Then you have a couple stage of coupling. And the coupling stage is now we have communicated that we are exclusive with each other. And here's what my suggestion would be for most people. Is you should not be kissing until there is coupling. Is you should not get physical until you have gone through the intellectual and the emotional first. Is, in my eyes, people get physical right off the bat. And because they do that, they get, like I said before, they get emotionally drunk. And then you can't make a wise choice because now you're infatuated with this person and emotions get at play. So you got kicking it, coupling, then you got commitment. And I think people throw out the I love you way too fast. I think that's the next step in the evolution of this relationship. Because when you get commitment and you start saying I love you, the next stage is engagement. It's like, okay, now we're going to actually be totally committed to each other long term. So my wife said I love you before I did. And I think she was expecting me to say it right back. And I was like, I'm not ready for that. Like, I had some significant, I told you guys about some of my dating relationships. I had some significant fears. So I knew if I said I love you, that's like, okay, the next step is she's expecting a ring. So I wasn't ready for that yet. And I'll still figure some of that out. And I would just suggest to all you guys, don't feel the pressure to have to take the next step forward. Part of it is just learning how to manage some of your own emotions, not live in fear, but also live with wisdom at the same time. And then the last one would be covenant, is you put a ring on the finger and you're expecting to do life together in sickness and in health.
That's so good. I'll definitely ask you more questions behind the scenes, but my last question is more general, and this is a question I get so often. It's like, how do you get discipline? Where is your discipline coming from?
Such a great question. To be honest, I don't want to act like I am the picture perfect model of it. I would definitely say I am disciplined, but there are seasons where I'm definitely not perfect. So I want to make a distinction. Being disciplined and being perfect are different, because I think perfectionism is what kills people's discipline. So to me, if I was disciplined and if I was consistent 24 days out of the 30, that's discipline. It leaves room for humanity, first and foremost. I think perfectionism kills discipline a lot of times. So that's the first. But then I'd also say, if you don't have a vision and you don't have clear values documented, written down, no wonder you're not disciplined. So the people, Proverbs 29, if you have no vision, people cast off restraint, or they stumble all over themselves. So to me, when I got a vision from God for my life of what I want to do the rest of my life, like I pictured things like this: communicating on stages, being on podcasts and getting to talk with incredible people and being able to coach and help people. Like, I live for these kind of things. And I saw this years ago. And so what happened is the Lord gave me a dream, but what I needed to do to get to my destiny, which is the fulfillment of that dream, is there's a stage right here in the middle of development. And so I had a dream of, I was going to be preaching on stages to thousands of people. I would have content in books and things like that I could release that people would be impacted by. And I'm in that season now. But it took me quite literally 12 years of just hard work, putting my head down, a lot of personal growth, a lot of tough conversations, a lot of experiences where I learned from, a lot of mistakes that were made. And so, but I had this dream all along. And that dream or vision really allowed me to reverse engineer. And so I saw myself in the future, and I said, okay, God gives me a prophetic picture of my future. So he gives a picture, but with that picture comes a process. And I think all that, you have that anchor in the future, which produces this discipline of, one day I believe that God has called me to this, number one, but then two is I have a responsibility as well. God's sovereign, but I'm responsible to be able to get to that place. So I think that's where discipline comes from, is birth from. Not to mention, I think that's part of it is a dream, but I also think a part of it is pain, is my personal frustrations and honestly just pain points have produced my passion. I think pain produces passion. And I remember what it was like being having purposelessness. I remember what it was like being relationally out of order. And all these places led me to, this is why I'm so passionate about this. And I want to help people that are in my season that I was in years ago. And so I think that has produced discipline. I want to help the people I used to be. And so because I'm clear on that, I think it produces so much discipline.
I am so excited to watch this podcast over and just take notes on everything. Last question is, how can we get connected to you? How can we learn more from you? Just, you can plug anything.
Love it. Well, I do want to say again, thank you for having me on, Annie. I know I said it before, but I am so proud of you. To me, I love that we have a relationship well beyond podcasts or anything online. We've had some awesome seasons, some darker seasons. You're incredible. And so I'm so proud. I am so sad you're going to be leaving us. But I'm always your pastor. Don't ever forget that. You better. And I'll call you. You can follow me on Instagram, Devon Frye. Devon is how it's spelled, Devon Frye. Everybody messes with me with that. I am on YouTube as well. So you can just type in my name as well. You can subscribe to Connect Church. I have a lot of content and art and podcasts and sermons on there. And that's a great way to do it.
What about the Academy?
Oh, yeah. I do have the Academy. So the Academy is I'm learning how to plug some of the stuff. It's hard for me to sell stuff, but I only sell things that I really think can make an actual impact on people. So we do have something called the Academy, which is a faith-based coaching program, helping people to heal from their past, but also grow for their future. And so kind of the two things we highlight is counseling and coaching. Counseling is for the past, coaching is for the future. And I think the body of Christ needs both so desperately. So that's what I've been doing.
Thank you so much for being on the Thriving Teens podcast. And I can't wait to have you on again in the future. Yes. Thank you so much. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.
Peace, y'all.